Welcome, sports fans, boys and girls of all ages, to episode number 5 of Garbage Time Takes. My name is Derek. With me today, as always, are my co-hosts Bobby, and Dennis. And currently, we are doing this on a Tuesday because it is Thanksgiving break here in a couple days here at CMU. And so, because we will not be on campus on Friday when we usually record it, we are recording it today, Tuesday. One thing we wanted to make sure we let you guys know on is that we have now created some social media accounts. Bobby, would you like to inform the good people about what we've done?
Yes, folks, I would. As the resident media technician here at Garbage Time Takes, we have started an official Instagram and Twitter account. You can find us on Instagram at Garbage Time Takes, all one word, no capitals, no have to worry about anything like that. And you can find us on Twitter at Garb Time Takes. That's GARB Time Takes.
All right, we're pretty excited about that. We'll start posting on there pretty soon. We don't know exactly what we'll post. Maybe just some sports updates, maybe us in the studio.
We'll definitely be posting when our podcasts are going live, and we've already got our Apple Podcast link on there as well.
Awesome.
And then you can check out the Instagram page has the link to our Podbean as well, already on there. We may be posting some sort of polls on there as well to let you guys know let you guys interact and vote on what you might like to see in the podcast to give us some more ideas. So we're going to throw those on there sometime soon as well. So feel free if you're listening at home to go on and hop over there and give us a follow and check us out.
Yeah. I know one thing when we were thinking about creating the Instagram account and the Twitter for doing polls for our Right Bench Baller segment, we could always ask you guys who you think the ultimate Right Bench Baller was for the week. So just kind of things like that, just so you guys can get some interaction with us. Well, guys, Northern Illinois has done it. Before we get into, the meat of our podcast.
Huge, absolutely huge.
We've been following the Northern Illinois versus Western Michigan game. This had MAC West Conference implications on the line. Northern Illinois came into this game at 4-7. Western was at 7-4, but 5-2 in the conference. CMU was half game back, tied.
We're tied with Western, so we came in at 5-2 as well. But with Western beating us early in the season, they would hold the tiebreaker in any tie situation in the MAC West.
That's right. So Western and CMU were tied atop the MAC West at 5-2 in the conference. Basically, we needed Northern Illinois to put off an improbable upset, and gosh darn it, they did it.
17-14.
Darn near gave us all a heart attack. If you were following the game yourself, you would know, and if you did not follow, we'll tell you ourselves, Northern Illinois with a chance to ice the game.
3rd and
3 with about 2 minutes and 10 seconds left on the clock after Western had burned all their timeouts. Northern Illinois rushes for a first down, but fumble it.
Oh my goodness.
And Western recovered.
The drama ensues.
And what looked like a game that was practically iced was all of a sudden up in the balance again. And then as we were watching the ESPN screen, Western Michigan completed a deep pass, 26 yards, but a fumble was forced on that play as well, where Northern Illinois recovered. And Northern Illinois has indeed ended the game with 3 straight kneel downs. So Central Michigan, our chips, this Friday, Black Friday.
We'll have important day.
We'll have a chance to beat Toledo at home to clinch the MAC West after going 1-11 last year, with our win coming against a non-FBS opponent. Just to put some perspective into the turnaround this program went through in 1 year under Jim McElwain.
An absolutely great job by Jim McElwain, and thanks, Western, for messing it up.
Yes,
absolutely incredible.
We're incredibly grateful to Western Michigan. Thank you for choking.
Northern Illinois with not even a bowl game. I don't think play for. Just went out there and
they're 5-7.
Absolutely played spoiler, and Western Michigan choked as per usual. So thank you, Western. Thank you, Northern Illinois, guys. Let's move on into the podcast. We'll get back to the implications of this game a little bit later. So the college football playoff rankings were indeed released tonight, and we have a new number one. The Ohio State Buckeyes have indeed taken over the number one spot from LSU. So our top four currently in the college football playoff is Ohio State 1, LSU 2, Clemson 3, Georgia 4, rounding out the rest of the top 10, Bama, Utah, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Baylor, and Penn State. Baylor was our big mover up with moving up 5 spots. Oregon dropped out of the top 10 for a total of 8 spots. So big fall for Oregon. That loss last week to Arizona State. An absolute
heartbreaker.
They absolutely wet the bed out there in Arizona. They've eliminated themselves from playoff contention at this point. Guys, what do you think about Ohio State taking over the number one spot from LSU?
I mean, I feel like it's really just a coin flip at this point. OSU and LSU have both looked so dominant at points, both undefeated on the season. As a Big Ten supporter, glad to see that Ohio State is above LSU, but it'll be interesting to see with the big rivalry game that we will get to later on in the podcast. Will that change after this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, when you're talking about Ohio State and LSU, these are the two best teams in the country, pretty much hands down at this point. I think I'd be hard-pressed to find someone who would make a different argument. Maybe you could make an argument for Clemson, but I really don't think so. And I think this weekend we'll really see what OSU is made of. Big win against Penn State last week, finally taking down at least a formidable opponent. So we'll see what they're able to do with Michigan this upcoming week. But I certainly think at this point in the season that those two teams deserve to be at the top, and it really is a coin flip, like Bobby said.
Yeah, I know for me personally, I was rather disappointed to see Ohio reach the number one spot. I don't think that win at home over Penn State warranted them jumping an LSU team that beat the number 2 team Alabama at the time of their win. I think LSU at this point has more quality wins than Ohio does, but I can see where the committee is coming from. But another factor that played into it for me was, Ohio State wasn't really dominant in their win over Penn State. They were for, the first half of the game, but then let Penn State crawl back into it with some untimely turnovers. So what I learned as a Michigan fan is that Ohio State does appear to be beatable, but it's definitely not going to be easy. But yeah, I was surprised, especially with LSU getting 50 votes in the AP poll, that the committee decided to jump LSU with Ohio State. But I think, as Dennis said, it's really a coin flip. You can't really go wrong either way. I know for me, I think this just puts Ohio State, in a position to where if they lose a game either to Michigan or to whoever is the winner of the Minnesota-Wisconsin game in the Big Ten Championship, so that they don't fall out of the top 4. I think that's all this is really doing for them at this point. I think looking at the rest of the top 10, Baylor jumping up 5 spots was a bit surprising to me.
Oh, for sure, especially because I don't think they're.
Who'd they beat? Texas.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that win was.
Yeah, I think they beat Texas, and they jumped 5 spots. Texas is a god awful team this year. They beat
Texas 24-10.
They beat them 24-10 after coming off of a loss to Oklahoma at home, where they blew the lead. So I'm not really sure why Baylor jumped all of these teams back into the top 10, regardless of whether or not they're first in the Big 12. But I guess that's beside the point when they're not going to make the college football playoff anyway.
Bobby, I'm curious your thoughts on Utah. I was going to bring that up briefly. I know we've talked about this a couple of times. We talked about what a Ute was. So I was just curious what you think about that number 6 ranking, especially now that Oregon's fallen kind of down in the rankings after losing to Arizona State this weekend.
I'm really excited about the Utes' chances. I think that they'll probably still get an opportunity to play Oregon in that.
In the
Pac-12 championship. That's right.
Game.
Yeah,
that's right. I think that could be a signature win that could really help put them over the hump in these last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, it does look like at the current standing that somebody's going to have to lose for them to get in, which I think is unbelievable because I want to see them in so badly. Not that they necessarily have more quality wins than some of the teams that are above them, but I just want to see a team that not normally in the mix be in the mix. I know that maybe we'll talk about this on another podcast, but I'd like to see an expanded playoff personally, just so we can see more teams like a Utah, make it in and throw their hat in the mix. Sir.
Like a Minnesota, maybe.
Well, I think Minnesota's fraudulent, so that's a poor example. But like some at-large teams that are playing well that year, just besides the normal SEC Big Ten teams that we always see making a run at.
The
Americans certainly won't be in there no matter what. They could expand it to 50 teams.
You have the Central Florida argument from the last few years. Obviously not this year. That's invalid, but. When they claim themselves as national champions after going undefeated, and then
fraudulently so, might I add?
Perhaps, and then even a couple years ago,
let
the boys play. A couple years ago with Western was one of those teams from a smaller conference that was up there in the rankings. I believe that's when they had Corey Davis.
Yep.
In that era, and so there's certainly an argument to be made for an extended playoff. I would certainly like to see that as well. That's probably a different podcast episode.
Probably. I know, just going back to Utah real briefly before we move on, what it would probably take for Utah is Auburn is going to have to beat Bama.
That's right.
And then LSU is going to have to beat Georgia in the SEC title game. So it's as simple as that, but it's definitely simpler put into words than what we may actually see on the field. So Utah currently on the outside looking in. Let's move on. Ohio State beat Penn State, as we talked about, to move into the number 1 spot, which brings us to hate week number 2 for me, Michigan versus Ohio State. We have not won in a very long time. It's very disappointing. We've come close a couple of times. 2017 at home, I believe if we have a competent quarterback not named John Crackcorn.
Oh, Jimmy Crack!
We win that game at home. We don't blow it late. So Michigan has had their chances. They tend to fold on the road, as we saw last year. But this year, I have a bit of a cautious optimism. I like the way we're playing. I'm definitely not going in expecting a win, but I do expect it to be competitive. Michigan's playing the best football I've seen them play in a long time. And I will be there Saturday, and so they better give me a good show because it's not cheap to get into the big house for the game. Bobby, what do you think Michigan's chances are versus Ohio State, and what do you see the outcome of the game looking like?
I see that. I don't know if I necessarily foretell a high-end Michigan performance as much as I foretell Ohio State coming down to competition. I think that it will be a tight game. But I do think that Ohio State will pull it out in those late quarters. I hope Don Brown shows up calling the plays
instead of Bondrown.
Instead of Bondrown, as Derek Jacobs' his alter ego. That's right. A bum. But we've been hearing all the off-season leading up to this point how Don Brown or Bondrown, whatever you want to call him, has been tailoring his defense, potentially making changes after last year, moving into this year. For Ohio State specifically, I've heard some stuff about how they're playing a little bit more zone, guarding crossing routes a little bit better because they were getting absolutely sliced to pieces against that track squad that was the Ohio State wide receiving core last year.
And we were first exposed with crossing routes against Indiana. I was at that game too, and I was like, "Ooh, this is a little bit concerning that Indiana is able, to move the ball up and down the field on us. They weren't able to score because we." Bunkered down near the red zone. But, they were tearing us up with crossing routes, and then Ohio State did tear us up with crossing routes for multiple scores. I think, this year you haven't seen a whole lot of Michigan getting burned on crossing routes because Don Brown has adjusted for it. He's stubborn in a lot of ways, but he is adapting because he knows he has to. And I think, I'll be interested to see how Ohio State plans to attack our defense. But enough of me talking. Dennis, what do you got to say?
Yeah, this is always such a fun game. Thanksgiving weekend to watch. I've been invested for quite some time. Probably not as long as these guys here, especially not Derek. Coming from Ohio, but not being an Ohio State fan, a lot of people ask me that, are you a Buckeye fan, especially coming to school in a state like Michigan, where Ohio is a swear word.
That's right. That's right.
But I'm not necessarily an Ohio State fan, and the reason I like to say I'm not an Ohio State fan is because I know a lot of them, and they're very...
obnoxious?
Obnoxious is a good word. They usually get under my skin a little bit. But in terms of this game specifically, I think back to last year, and I think about the hype that was around that game and Michigan's defense and all this. They were going to march into the horseshoe and take care of business, and then that did not happen by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
they actually got blown out.
Thanks for the reminder.
Not to pierce my co-host.
You want to call out 62-39 while you're at it, Dennis?
I'll hold off on that for now, but I think everyone understands that.
Yes, of course.
I envision Ohio State getting punched in the mouth early, and then rallying towards the beginning of the second half. But look for Michigan to come out and try to get the crowd into it early, try a few things early to catch Ohio State off guard, play from the lead is rather playing from behind, because I don't like this Michigan team as much playing from behind. But
Neither do I.
I think that's easy to say, but we've seen hesitancy at times, not in these last couple weeks, but at times for Michigan to open up that passing playbook and start slinging the rock. And they do like to establish the run.
You can't establish the run when you're down.
Exactly, and if Josh Gaddis and the offense are willing to start slinging the rock early and often and punch Ohio State in the mouth early, that'll bode well for getting Charbonnet involved in the running game. Proceeding from that, the defense just needs to have a bend but not break it mentality, as far as I'm concerned, because I think it's almost a given that Ohio State's probably going to put up some points, but it's limiting those touchdowns to field goals that's really going to be the difference.
And one thing, last thing from me on this anyway, is I completely agree with all of that, but I think in this game specifically, maybe more so than any other, home field is such a factor. Last year Michigan was kind of hyped as the better team. They went to Columbus and they got smacked. But this year, you have Ohio State being this hyped up team. They're number one now in the country in the college football playoff rankings, just topping LSU as we mentioned. And now they're heading to the big house. And I think that home field advantage in this game specifically is such a huge factor. It's the game. This is everyone's going to be there, and the crowd is going to be your friend if you're the home team.
Get them into it early.
Get them into it early, and I think I agree with Bobby. If Michigan comes out swinging, as I expect them to, it should be a dogfight to the very end. If they're falling behind early, it might not be quite as good of a game, but I anticipate quite a good game. I expect Michigan to come out swinging, maybe put up a couple of early scores, get the crowd into it, and it's going to take a late rally from Ohio State, I believe. And I think they'll make that rally, but it should be quite a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I also, I would be foolish to go in, predicting a Michigan win. I just, we've seen what Ohio State can do. I don't think it's, out of the question and completely impossible that Michigan can't pull it off, because it is a rivalry game and, anything can happen as college football. But, it's been tough because Michigan in big games in the past has not shown up. But there does seem to feel like there's a little bit of a different Michigan team coming around than I felt in the past. But I will definitely, I'm just hoping for a good, fun, interesting game. If we keep it close, I just want to see progress. We haven't really been able to close out seasons under Jim Harbaugh, mainly because we lose to Ohio State every season. But we'll see what happens, and I'll be more than interested to be there. Moving on. CMU versus Toledo, as we mentioned earlier, is going to be for the MAC West. What are your guys' thoughts? Are we going to Detroit if we win?
I think we may have to make an appearance in Detroit. I'm really just still blown away by what's happened with the CMU football team. Just 1 year ago, we were at those games, watching. I believe we were all there when we
were there in the winter, in the cold, in the wind, in the rain,
and we were just watching utter misery, utter blowouts.
Yeah.
Thank God John Bonamego was removed, as I'll say for like the 20th millionth time on this podcast.
Guy's a scrub.
And currently It's a huge turnaround, and I think it would be absolutely program killing if we made it all this way and lost to the 3-4 in conference Toledo Rockets at home,
who are also 1-4 on the road.
Exactly, who have no business winning this game,
and we haven't lost at home. And that's another thing. We haven't lost a single game at home. 7-4 this year. All those on the road.
This would be an insane upset for just given this season so far, and this would really put the recovery stamp on this season. It'd be the cap to a great season. Many players who stuck around through the 1-11 mayhem that we've witnessed.
Worst to first, and I remember even after the last season, they came out with I believe it was the top 10 worst college football teams of the year. And CMU made the list.
Yes, we did.
we were on the list, and now to think that we might be headed to Detroit 1 year later.
I think we were the second worst team on the list. I think there was only one other team that was worse.
It was
than us.
bad.
It was pretty bad.
It was very, very bad.
ESPN list, I believe.
Yes, I believe so. Also, MSU finally won. That's gotta feel nice. That's gotta feel nice for Bobby, getting a shutout win over Rutgers, might I add.
Pitched a shutout.
That's gotta be a big win for MSU, because the last thing you wanted to do was lose your bowl eligibility to Rutgers. Bobby, you'll be attending a Saturday game this week as well, MSU versus Maryland. How excited are you?
I'm very excited. It's going to be absolutely horrendous conditions at the game, and I'd expect nothing less from a November 30th game in East Lansing for bowl eligibility on the line. There'll be all but 2 people, me and my girlfriend, in attendance in the stadium. It will be a very empty stadium. But, if they let me bring a sign into the venue, I would say, in Mark D'Antonio we trust. And we're going to be going bowling. Hopefully that we don't blow it to Maryland. We've had a pretty good run against them in the past. And we also pitched a shutout against Rutgers.
That's right.
But that's one thing when you pay an absolutely brutal schedule in November.
That was truly brutal.
Yeah, it was.
That was just a rough time.
You get a light at the end of the tunnel. Unfortunately, we have made it to the light at the end of the tunnel, and we just need to capitalize. I was so enthused to see a shutout.
Regardless of the opponent.
Just a dominant win in the scorer column. And I'm looking for a replicant this week with me in attendance.
Yeah. Dennis, you also escaped last week with the UC Bearcats.
We did. We truly did escape.
How are you feeling about UC moving forward? Because that was quite a nail biter.
It was quite a nail biter. UC has played well enough to win, and that's about it in the last 3 or 4 weeks. We had that scare against Eastern Carolina.
Oh my Lord!
Temple, a reputable program, but certainly scared. What was that, Bobby?
The Owls?
The Owls, yes. The Owls, they always seem to give us some fits.
I was really pulling this year.
Me too. I think everyone in this room that's not named Dennis was pulling for him. But absolutely huge coming up. We get to play Memphis here with potential conference championship implications on the line, and certainly New Year's Six Bowl implications on the line, certainly in the discussion for one of those potential spots. Even though we've just been escaping, I liked the play of Desmond Ridder at quarterback last week. Michael Warren played quite well as well. And it just really, when it came down to it, it was just simple mistakes that we were making. Temple really beat themselves in that game. I mean, if you look back at it, they missed a field goal. They had a really dumb turnover. They threw a pick at the end of the game that wasn't even close to the receiver. It was basically gift wrapped.
I was so disgusted watching this game with Dennis, sitting there knowing that Temple should have won, had every opportunity to win, and they lost on a blocked PAT, getting ran back to the house.
But nevertheless, my Bearcats sit at 10-1, only losses to Ohio State.
Yes, it
was a blowout loss, but it was to the now number 1 team in the country, and for good reason. So I'm very proud of my Bearcats. I think we sat down and looked at the schedule before the season, and I was calling for 10-2.
Yes, you were.
So that might be what shakes out, but at this point, I'm certainly hopeful for 11-1, and it's going to have to come against the Memphis Tigers.
Now, Dennis, I don't know much about the American Conference because I don't care too much for the American Conference, But do you have like an actual conference championship game, or is this just kind of the de facto conference championship game?
We do. No, there'll be a conference championship game.
Okay.
So in this situation, Memphis, I believe, needs to win to enter the conference championship game.
Okay.
And then it would be a rematch as UC has locked up the American East.
Okay. All right. Another note on UC, they did lose to Bowling Green in basketball. So, return of the MAC. Bowling Green beat Cincinnati because the American Conference sucks.
In the U.S. Virgin Islands. There was the Paradise Jam basketball tournament.
Oh, my God.
I wish I was there, but not in the stadium because that would have made me sad to watch.
Well, they paved Paradise and put up a parking lot for the old Bearcats.
They paved it and put up a parking lot.
This past week.
That's right.
As Bowling Green, who's, to my dismay, unraveled the CMU basketball team many a time.
Yes, they did.
Took you out with good reason.
The John Brandon era is off to a rough start, I'll say that.
Yes. Before we get into the NFL, Dennis, I was talking to you earlier about what it would take for Michigan to make the playoff.
You were indeed. This was an interesting conversation. I had to have Derek throw it in here.
And so I will backtrack just a little bit before we move forward. Number one that has to happen, Michigan obviously must beat Ohio State. That's a given, and if this doesn't happen, nothing else does. Now, keep in mind, as I'm telling you guys all this, I, one, don't believe it will happen, because that would be asinine, and two, it's highly improbable. So let's move on to point number 2. Auburn must beat Alabama. That would practically eliminate Alabama from playoff, contention. They would be a 2-loss team with no chance of getting into the SEC championship game, and so that would take them out, especially with Mac Jones at quarterback rather than Tua. I believe anything is possible.
Matt Jones was 7 tubs, 1 pick this year with a 70% completion.
Okay, but who did he play last week?
Seven tubs, 1 pick.
Can you even name the team they played last week?
Because it was a scrub.
Yeah, right? Because I cannot, and so Mac Jones couldn't even put up like 2 tubs on Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is cheap.
That's Ole Mississippi to you.
All right, whatever. Number 3 point. Wisconsin must beat Minnesota. This would put Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game over Minnesota, and both teams would be at 2 losses at that point. Number 4, Oklahoma State must beat Oklahoma. This would put Oklahoma at 2 losses as well, and then I believe they would be facing Baylor in the conference championship game in a rematch. Number 5, Oregon must beat Utah, much to Bobby's dismay. That would eliminate Utah. Oregon has already fallen so far out of the top 10 that I don't think a Pac-12 championship will matter at this point. Then, as mentioned earlier, Oklahoma would need to beat Baylor. That would be point number 6. Basically, if we get to this point, the debate becomes, is Michigan as a 2-loss team better than a conference champion Oklahoma as a 2-loss team? And depending on how Oklahoma plays against Baylor in that conference championship game with their loss to Oklahoma State, you can make a strong case that Michigan could get the nod since they've been doing nothing but improving since halftime against Penn State. Point number 7, LSU needs to beat Georgia in the conference championship game. That's a given because Georgia currently holds the number 4 spot. LSU would be an automatic lock in the college football playoff, and so your top 3 would be set with Ohio State, Clemson, and LSU. Point number 8, Ohio State would then need to beat Wisconsin in the conference championship game as well. This is the 8th and final point.
I would just like to point out we're on point 8.
Yes, we are at point 8.
We're on point 8.
The Red Sea would need to part.
There are 8 games that would need to go in Michigan's favor, and obviously Ohio State beating Wisconsin locks them in and kicks Wisconsin out because they'll be a 3-loss team. And even then, Michigan still could possibly not get in because you would have a 2-loss conference champion Oklahoma. But Dennis was rather intrigued by that. I thought it was kind of funny.
I think it's interesting.
Just to look over. Thanks for this Click on Detroit article by Derek Hutchinson for the insight. And now we will move on to Detroit again with the Detroit lovable loser Lions.
3-7-1.
3-7-1 coming off an absolutely
Yikes.
dreadful performance against Washington, where Dwayne Haskins got his first ever NFL win. wasn't even on this field.
Didn't even take the final knee.
Didn't even take the final kneel of the game because he was out taking selfies. The Redskins are an absolutely decrepit organization. They have literally zero things going right for them. And then, Detroit gift-wrapped them the game and said, we don't want this win. You can have it. Bobby, your thoughts on the Lions losing yet again?
I don't even know what to say. At this point, it's so sorry what is going on with this franchise. And we outline it every week. Week by week, we sit here. For at least the past 2 episodes, I feel like we've sat here and outlined how the Lions are just in a downward hurricane.
Yeah, not even a spiral at this point.
And they can just somehow, they can't seem to stop the bleeding, even against what is one of the worst, if not the worst, franchises in the league currently.
Yes.
And it's just the same old stuff. Killing ourselves with turnovers. Penalties. Sacked 6 times.
Bad defense.
You name it, the Lions were committing it. Special teams blunders.
Special teams killing.
John Bonamego.
Thanks, John Bonamego. Yet again, you've ruined another one of my favorite teams.
And, after the game, honestly, I was sitting here saying, maybe it's a good thing that we did lose this game because we are one step closer to securing a better pick.
That's right.
And if we can move Washington up, then darn it, we'll move him up. But Matt Stafford says he wants to come back, and if he does, we're going to start winning games, and we're going to go in the wrong direction. At this point, it might be best to sit Matt Stafford down for the rest of the season.
I agree.
And just ride Jeff Driscoll.
Did you see Jeff Driscoll's hurt? And he's questionable?
He's questionable now, so that means we're going to have like David Blau, or as I like to call him, David Blow, because he's going to blow for us in there, quarterback from Purdue.
I don't even know who that is.
He was straight Dookie at Purdue, and somehow got picked up by the Lions.
Yeah,
that's why.
It's definitely been really unfortunate season.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
And I'm sorry I didn't say this before, but if I didn't say it before, I'll say it again. Matt Patricia, see you later. Bob Quinn, you're gone.
Yeah.
I mean, this is absolute. This cannot happen.
Yeah. This
is the definition of losing intangibles in the worst franchise that ever existed in the NFL.
Yeah, it's really tough because we can talk about should the Lions tank, should the Lions bench Stafford for the rest of the year. We're just looking over the injury report right now, and the Lions have really been hurt all year long. Trey Flowers, concussion. Rashawn Melvin, questionable. He missed last week's game. TJ Hawkinson, questionable. Marvin Hall, our big deep threat, questionable. He left last game. Jeff Driscoll, as previously mentioned, has a hamstring injury. He's questionable. Frank Ragnow, starting center. He's questionable. Deshaun Hand, he really hasn't been healthy all year. He's questionable. Starting safety Tracy Walker, questionable. Matt Stafford, obviously doubtful. Jamal Agnew also got hurt 2 weeks ago against the Cowboys. He's questionable. Even somehow our punter Sam Martin has ended up being questionable, along with Damon Snacks Harrison being questionable. So the injury list goes on and on and on. I think at this point the Lions are better off, shelving their, better players for the rest of the year. I don't think we should see Stafford the rest of the year. There's some changes that I believe are going to have to be made at the end of this year, whether it's at the head coaching, whether it's at the GM. Because even if we do get a good draft pick, I really don't have faith in Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia to use it, the right way. Imagine if we get the number 1 pick and we don't pick Chase Young. That would just be the epitome of the Detroit Lions franchise. Looking forward, at their schedule, they have, 3 extremely losable games against Chicago, Minnesota, and Green Bay. Tampa Bay, they have an offense, and so with Detroit's defense, that could turn into a shootout real quick. And Denver plays, stingy defense. They don't really have an offense. But if Matt Stafford isn't playing any of those games, I wouldn't, be horribly...
We lost to Washington.
We lost to Washington. So I can't say I'd be horribly upset if we end up losing out. I would actually be pretty thrilled about it. This team was 0-4 in the preseason, and I was trying to convince myself that things would be different, and they just were not this year. So really, really sad about this Lions season, really disappointed, and I'll be interested to see what the offseason brings in terms of changes. Dennis, big news out of Cincinnati.
Big news indeed.
And a big rant.
You better watch out.
The Cincinnati Bengals lost yet again to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
We're not surprised.
Who were on their third-string quarterback. They benched Mason Rudolph for Devlin Hodges. Dennis, the Bengals made a surprise announcement that Andy Dalton would be retaking his position as starting cornerback for Ryan Finley. What are your thoughts?
Well, you might have to watch me on this one because I was sitting down. Luckily, when I got the notification that they would be replacing the rookie Finley, who they brought in 3 games ago after Andy Dalton started 0-8 and proceeded to lose 3 games. He proceeded to lose 3 games against the Ravens, the Raiders, and the Steelers. That's the first thing that I'm going to start out with.
Okay.
I would like to point out that Andy Dalton, I did the math on this, Andy Dalton has started 128 games in the NFL, all with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Alrighty.
All of them. He started this season for the first 8 games, and he lost all of them, including losses to Seahawks reputable, 49ers reputable, lost to the Bills, lost to the Cardinals at home, lost to the Jaguars at home, lost to the Rams by 2 touchdowns. And then Ryan Finley comes in, they're week 10 after the bye versus the Ravens, the Raiders, and the Steelers. Can't win a game. He lost the last 2 by less than a touchdown. 128 career games for Andy Dalton. The rookie Finley gets 3 games against 3 of our better opponents for the entire season, and he's immediately benched. You know what you have in Andy Dalton. You've seen what he can do, or what he can't do in this case, with such a lackluster offensive line, lackluster defense that hasn't played for him all year. You give the kid 3 games. I don't think Andy Dalton won all 3 of his first games. I mean, I'd like to go back and look at it. I mean, I know we made the playoffs Andy's first year, but we also had a better team, a better supporting cast, a better defense by far. And so this move surprises me. I know a lot of people are saying that this was the right move to bring Dalton back in. I think the only thing it does is it maybe gives you the possibility of beating the Dolphins or the Browns in the next couple of weeks, picking up a couple wins and losing your first overall draft pick. I just don't understand where the organization is coming from on this, because you've decided at this point that Andy Dalton is not your quarterback of the future. You benched him. He lost 8 games in a row. You said, okay, we're going to try and see what we have in this other kid, Ryan Finley, that we just drafted last year. And you give him 3 opportunities and you say, nope, he's not it. And so we're just going to try to win a couple games so we don't get the first overall pick.
Yeah, I am rather, confused at Andy Dalton coming back. I don't know if this is because the Bengals think Andy Dalton is worse than, Ryan.
I don't know how that could possibly be true.
Or if he thinks he's better. I don't know exactly what's going on with the Bengals. I don't know if they're trying to win games. If they are laying the groundwork for, drafting a quarterback, then they wouldn't necessarily have to be worried about obtaining the first overall pick, because if they're looking for a quarterback and anyone not named Chase Young, then they don't need the first pick to get him necessarily. Definitely wasn't, good to see Ryan Finley only have a 22 total QBR over the past 3 weeks. You can make an excuse for him against Baltimore, obviously, but, Oakland doesn't have the strongest secondary. The Steelers, they aren't necessarily the strongest team either, but I do sense your frustration for sure. Bobby, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would like to say, to start off, that I believe, in my mind, if the goal of the organization was to lose by putting Ryan Finley in, then he did a heck of a job.
He did.
And
I can agree with that.
And if Andy Dalton plays these past 2 weeks, I could make a strong case that they win these past 2 games against the Raiders and the Steelers, and are now 2-0 in the past 2 weeks. The only potential, and I agree, Dennis, this is asinine in terms of, you want to see what you've got there at your backup that you drafted merely 1 year ago. And that's essentially now saying that you've wasted that pick. But the only thing I can see this as a move for the Bengals is, since they've got some weak opponents coming up. The Jets this week, the Dolphins, the Browns twice, which are those are winnable games. Potentially, maybe they get Andy Dalton in. Andy Dalton looks good, picks up a couple wins, and they trade him to try to get his draft value up.
That's potential.
Or his trade value up, because right now his last 8 games were 0-8. I mean, teams are really going to be able to make a case if he's on the trade block that they shouldn't be giving up much for him. And Cincinnati knows that Andy Dalton isn't a bum. He's not.
Of course, he almost put together an MVP season a couple of seasons ago, and then he got hurt against Pittsburgh.
I mean, he's not a 5-star quarterback by any stretch of the imagination. But many teams would die for an Andy Dalton to lead them,
probably,
compared to what they've got, and they'd be interested in. They're trying to jag if they're going to get rid of him and they're going to look for another quarterback. They might as well try to get something for Andy Dalton, who's still got a few years left in this league. But that's the only move I can see that potentially why the Bengals would do this.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that does have some value. I hadn't necessarily thought of that. I think the thing that really just gets to me is all of the media and all of the talk around this is the Ryan Finley experiment has quote-unquote failed.
Well,
3 games! 3 games!
I can't necessarily argue with them. He was rather pathetic in those 3 performances.
He was rather pathetic, but I sat here 3 weeks ago when they announced that Ryan Finley was going to be taking over quarterback duties, elated, because I said, he loses some games. I don't expect him to win out, but you want to see him improve. And so you set a baseline. He loses badly to the Ravens. Okay, not the best performance. He loses to the Raiders, not necessarily the best performance. And I understand that these 3 games have been quite pitiful. But if you don't have a couple of games to sample, then you can't improve. I don't understand how one improves over the course of 3 games to a level that's sufficient.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you there for sure. It's definitely a valid point. But yeah, just overall, the whole decision in general is questionable because we're not entirely sure if the Bengals are trying to win, if they're trying to lose, if they're trying to trade Andy Dalton. But I do think, from my personal standpoint, it's safe to say that Ryan Driscoll not Ryan Driscoll. What's his name?
Ryan Finley.
Ryan Finley. Yes, I was thinking of Jeff Driscoll because he was a former Bengal.
He was.
And I was going to ask you if you'd rather have Jeff Driscoll this year than Ryan Finley.
In terms of winning games, yes.
Yeah.
In terms of age and future promise, I would take Finley. And the only reason I say that is because, the Bengals organization, I just remember when they made this draft pick, I was kind of confused, but they were so high on this kid. They thought he could be the quarterback of the future. They thought he was the guy who could come in and potentially replace Dalton a couple years down the road. They hope not to do it this year, of course. And you give him 3 games. And so I certainly would, in terms of trying to win football games, I would take Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah, I think, the Bengals are probably just biting the bullet and saying, well, the Ryan Finley experiment failed. I can't really argue with them on that. And, they draft a quarterback in the first round this year because they're like, yeah, there's no way Ryan Finley is taking over for us. He hasn't showed that he's any better than Andy Dalton. I know that probably irks you, Dennis, because you'd like to see him get a couple more opportunities.
It does. I would like to see him get a couple more opportunities, but as we discussed, I do like Bobby's point. I think the big thing that could come out of this is maybe Dalton picks up a couple wins. We're still going to have a top draft pick.
That's right.
And then if they use that as trade bait, improve his trade value, then I could certainly see that as being a plus to the situation.
Yeah, and starting a rookie quarterback next year. All right, last week we had, 3 predictions, I think. We had our Lions predictions, our Bengals prediction, as well as what was our 3rd game? Did we pick Seahawks 49ers? Yes, we did, to a degree.
I think we did.
Yeah.
It was
Packers 49ers, I mean.
Seattle
Packers we did.
Seattle and Philadelphia we did as well, I believe.
I think so, yes. So I know, I think I was 3-1. My lone loss being picking the Lions to beat the Redskins, although I think I did have a disclaimer saying that don't be surprised if we end up blowing this one, which we did.
all said that.
I believe so.
I'm pretty sure that, we all said that the Steelers would beat the Bengals.
We did.
That where's our disparity? Was it in the Seahawks-Eagles game?
I said that the Packers were
going to beat the 49ers.
That's right. Bobby did say that.
obviously we all thought it was going to be a much closer game than it actually was.
I would like to point out that I was right on the tight ends being crucial. Because George Kittle absolutely had a whale of a game. Dude went off.
We didn't even know if the guy was going to play until like the day off.
That's right. And, that was, I just wanted to give myself some credit there for predicting that the tight end would be big. But yeah, also the Seahawks beating the Eagles as projected by the three of us. So
the Eagles. Let me just throw this in there. The Eagles need to start winning some games because they're going to have the Cowboys be the first in the NFC East. I mean, the winner of the division is going to be like 8-8, and that's
going to be terrible. It's going to be
and
awful.
It's not going to be the first time you've seen it either. I think the Cowboys, no more than 5 years ago, probably won the division at 9-7 or something pathetic like that. I mean, realistically, the NFC East is not going to advance to the NFC Conference Championship. It's either going to be, the Saints, the Seahawks, the Packers, the 49ers. The NFC East has no chance of winning anything past the wild card game. If that. I think the Cowboys are garbage. We went over it last week a little bit, that they're as mediocre as the Lions, except they might even be worse because they do have playoff expectations every year. Of course, Lions fans expect the playoffs every year, but is it really realistic or not? That can be up to debate. But a lot of the pundits in the media really love to project the Cowboys as America's, favorite to win the Super Bowl, all this garbage. So as much as I also do not like to see the Cowboys win and win the division, I don't think it'll matter in the grand scheme of things. But moving forward, in continuing with that, the Lions and the Cowboys, per Thanksgiving tradition, will be playing on Thursday. The Lions at 12:30, the Cowboys at 4:30, and our night game will be Atlanta versus New Orleans in what could be a shootout. Atlanta did upset New Orleans last time, but before we get ahead of ourselves, Bears-Lions preview. What are you guys thinking?
My God. This should be a game that the Lions can win.
You're saying that with a look of pain.
But they're not going to do it. The Chicago Bears will be victorious this Thanksgiving because the Lions are also inept down to winning on Thanksgiving.
They are.
In recent memory. They can't seem to get it done, but when can they ever? If we're losing to Dwayne Haskins, Mitch Trubisky's going to come out and look like an all-pro like he did against us the first time.
Yeah.
He's looked anemic since and will after. But, there's something about that special sauce that the Lions seem to throw at quarterbacks, a little faith, trust, and pixie dust from the Lions that gets the opposing quarterback over the hump. And
pixie dust.
And we will be more than likely losing this game and hopefully losing this game in order to further our draft stock.
Yeah, I think, I did this last week too. I've accepted defeat for the Lions at this point. I wasn't even upset with last week's loss. In fact, I expected it throughout the course of the game. And, this week I'm just going to try to, enjoy my turkey, enjoy my Thanksgiving, enjoy the family. And
that's right.
The Lions will be on in the background. Will I actively be rooting against them? No, not necessarily, because I always like to see the Lions win. But I'm not going to let it, affect my Thanksgiving if they end up losing, as I'm pretty sure they're going to, because we are god-awful. Dennis, thoughts on the Bears-Lions?
Yeah, I think this is a game that you usually hope to be pretty good, especially on a Thanksgiving afternoon. Usually it is quite competitive this year. It might be competitive in all the wrong ways, I would say. Quite a sad matchup. I don't think that I would fault you at all for just having it on in the background, and I certainly would hope it doesn't ruin your Thanksgiving.
Oh, no.
I would enjoy your turkey, enjoy your family first and foremost. But as far as the game goes, I think, I say this every week, I think Detroit can win. I think I've tried to live a little vicariously through the Lions this year, and that experiment failed as well.
Maybe that's why we're losing so much, because Dennis is out here living through the Lions as a Bengals fan.
All right,
and he's giving us his bad luck.
On that note, I'll take Chicago. So I'll take just because of that, I'll do that for you, and hopefully maybe that can actually get you a win. But I'll take Chicago. I think Mitchell Trubisky has a little bit of magic in him in Detroit this weekend.
Probably
very little, but
has career best against Detroit up to this point. But yeah, I also have Chicago. Bobby, I assume you have Chicago as well.
Oh, for sure.
What score predictions? What do you got? I'm gonna take the Bears in an absolute barn burner, 17-13.
All righty, I was going to go 24-17 Chicago as well.
24-10 Chicago.
2 touchdowns.
2 tough
wow.
games. Can't say I fault you there, especially if we're running out David Blowhard out there. Dallas, Buffalo, I'm not sold. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not sold on Buffalo. I think they've played a rather generous schedule up to this point. You know, the teams they have lost to have been clearly better than them and have proven it as such. With loss to the Eagles and Patriots, as well as a bit of a shocker loss to the Browns. But I mean, they really haven't played anyone all that impressive outside of Tennessee, and I think that was when Mariota was still at quarterback before the move to Tannehill. Buffalo, they've got a bit of a rough stretch, but looking at Buffalo's schedule, Dallas, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, New England, and the Jets.
That's rough. That is rough.
And the thing is, the Bills could either come out of this at 8-4, 8-5, 10-6, or they could come out at like 8-8. The Bills are the type of team that Josh Allen has been playing good enough to win games up to this point, but I don't see the Bills winning this game as much as I do hate the Cowboys. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cowboys absolutely choke this one. It'll be a bit of a homecoming for Cole Beasley coming back to Dallas, after they didn't want to give him some big money that Buffalo was willing to give them. But I'm going to have Dallas here. Final score, we'll go 24-20. All right. Salvation Army kettle will be out. President accounted for.
The president accounted for. All righty. Well, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Perhaps similar to my Golden Gopher belief in the Golden Gophers, that is, I do actually have a little bit more faith in the Bills. They have a tough stretch coming up. Maybe this is the part of me that just absolutely despises the Cowboys.
Yeah, maybe.
But I think they're going to actually march into AT&T and in a close one come out with a victory. I mean, I don't believe the Cowboys are worth their salt. I think they might end up winning the NFC East, and that's just going to be a joke, and they're going to get blown out.
The fact that they're winning the NFC East at a record of 6-5 right now, I think says all you need to know.
It does. It
One,
really
about
does.
The competition of the NFC East, and 2, about the Cowboys. Bobby, who do you got?
Another very tough one to pick, but I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, wow.
Hey! All righty.
I think that like Dennis said, the Cowboys are fraudulent. And that defense travels, and I believe the Bills will put up a defensive performance that will just hopefully smother the Cowboys. Their run game hasn't meant anything to write home about recently, and Dak Prescott, while playing well, I'm not sure if he can make the play in the moment when need be. I expect it to be low scoring. I'm actually going to predict it to be a 14-10 Bills game. Just because I think that, the last couple of weeks we've seen some very low-scoring games from the Cowboys, and I don't expect that trend to be broken.
Yeah, I think one good point you brought up, the Bills do have kind of an under-the-radar solid defense.
They do. It's a good defense.
I don't know what their specific rankings are, but, I mean, even against the Patriots, who haven't had the most elite offense this year, the Bills have been, limiting their opponents, pretty well, and their defense definitely shouldn't be overlooked this year going into that game against Dallas. Our third and final Thanksgiving game will be, as we said, New Orleans versus Atlanta. Earlier this year, Atlanta upset New Orleans in New Orleans. Bobby, who are you taking in New Orleans versus Atlanta?
No doubt New Orleans. I don't think it'll happen again. I just think that the Saints will take care of business, and it'll be high scoring, but it'll be a win for the Saints. As far as final score, I've got 35-24.
Oh man, you're right there where I'm thinking. Dennis, before I go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is not going to be the same result that we saw last time these two teams met up. Atlanta's just proven that they're pretty lackluster this year.
Losing to Tampa Bay.
And not in a formidable fashion. They lost to Tampa Bay pretty badly. It was clear from the beginning. I'm going to take the Saints as well. I'm going to go with 35-20.
I also will be taking the Saints. Devontae Freeman, I know, is still questionable going into this game. He did practice, but, you never know. Devontae Freeman hasn't had the healthiest of years this year. and the Falcons aren't really playing for anything. So if they do decide to hold them out, wouldn't really surprise me. I've got New Orleans at 34-20, actually, so we're all right there in the same ballpark. But, yeah, I think Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, and company, handled the Atlanta Falcons pretty thoroughly. Do we want to talk about the Monday night game? That's going to be the Minnesota Vikings versus the Seattle Seahawks.
That'll be a good one. Let's do it. Let's go for it.
Seattle coming off, as we mentioned earlier, pretty solid win over Philadelphia. Minnesota who did Minnesota play? Were they coming off the bye?
I think they're on a bye. Minnesota had a bye.
That's what I thought.
They were too.
I think Minnesota coming off the bye, going to go into Seattle and try to pull out a win there. That's going to be one heck of a game. Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook coming off a bye week. Adam Thielen finally getting healthy, possibly playing in that game. Stephon Diggs, Minnesota was really hitting their stride offensively before the bye week. Seattle's, they've sort of came back down to earth a little bit after they were running and gunning with everyone, but yet again, they're still a formidable offense. Currently, ESPN's got Minnesota at 53.3% chance to win, but we all know how predictions work at this day and age. It's football. Anything can happen. Does anyone want to start off with what they're thinking for Seattle versus Minnesota?
Yeah, I'll start it off. I think, this is going to be a battle of two good teams. This is going to be a really good Monday Night Football game. I'm sure a lot of fantasy implications as well.
Huge.
Especially with Russell Wilson, Dalvin Cook, Chris Carson. Big names in this game. But I ultimately think that the play of Russell Wilson is going to be what's able to pull it out for the Seahawks. And just being at home, that's obviously going to be a huge factor playing in CenturyLink Field. Seattle's just been really impressive for me this year. I think they've really stepped things up. They've been able to run the ball, and then obviously the play of Russell Wilson making his case for the MVP. Minnesota coming off the bye, they've been a little bit banged up. We'll see how things go when they kind of get out of that. But ultimately, I think this is going to be a game that Seattle is going to be in their court to lose, and I just don't see them being able to do that. So, final score, I'll go 2017. I think it'll be fairly close.
I'm going to agree with Dennis here. I really think on paper that Minnesota is the better team. Just looking at it, but the fact of the matter is that I just have a feeling that Kirk Cousins will start to look a little bit more human this week.
Yeah.
It brings me no pleasure to say that because I root for Kirk Cousins, but I just have a feeling that he will throw a couple interceptions, and that could be the difference in this game. Also, like Dennis said, a home game for the Seahawks, and with Russell Wilson playing well, it's really tough to bet against them. I'm going to go 27-20 Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with both of you. I also have Seattle. Kirk Cousins quietly, ever since, he was getting called out by his teammates, has really been on fire recently. Now you can say it's due to the scheme of their offense that isn't quite as vertical, as, Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes' game is, but he's been getting work done as a 7-to-1 TD to interception ratio. He's up there only a couple hundred yards behind Russell Wilson in terms of passing yards. But I think what really separates Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins is what Russell's able to do with his legs, able to extend plays, be an extra threat out of the backfield. Not to say that Kirk Cousins is immobile by any means, but Russell Wilson definitely just poses more of a threat. In terms of, the Dalvin Cook versus Chris Carson matchup, Dalvin Cook, extremely impressive this year, out here running like he's prime Adrian Peterson. Dude's been an absolute beast. I expect him to, get his work. I expect Chris Carson to get his work. But I also have the Seahawks coming out on top. I'm going to give them 34-28 in a pretty high-scoring affair. But once again, that'll be Monday night. And I don't know if you guys have a right bench baller for this week. We can either choose to do one, or we can hold off since we're running on a bit of a short week, short time to prepare. I know I don't have anyone off the top of my head.
Let's bounce back next podcast after the Thanksgiving matchup, and we can come in with the right bench baller. But
after we've had our turkey, our family time,
I think that it might just be I think we might just have to award the right bench baller award for this podcast to the Washington Redskins for looking like hot garbage and then somehow getting a win.
Actually, I got a better idea. How about we give the right bench baller to the Northern Illinois Huskies?
Yes! Let's go, Huskies!
Fire up chips, baby.
Fire up. Let's go.
Northern Illinois, congratulations. You guys as a team get the right bench ballers for your upset win over Western to give Central Michigan a chance to win the MAC West.
We're going to Detroit, baby. We're going to Detroit. Let's go.
We're going to Detroit, baby. But once again, just want to thank you guys as the viewers. Hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving. Eat lots of turkey. Get some food comas. Once again, we've created an Instagram, a Twitter. Garbage Time Takes on Instagram. And what is it on Twitter again?
At Garb Time
Takes on Twitter.
Garb Time Takes.
We'll try to post. We'll definitely give updates on when episodes will be coming out. Maybe give you guys a glimpse inside the studio every now and then. Preparation, that sort of thing.
Oh, it's high tech.
It's quite the elite level organization we're running here. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for us this week. Leave us that 5-star rating on iTunes. Subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter. I think if that covers it, if you guys are ready like I am, we'll close it out. So on a 1.
And a 2.
And a 3.
Peace.